Hello, and welcome to Attached Together, the podcast where we explore all things attachment theory for counsellors, psychotherapists, and psychologists. Created by the team at Optima, providers of the Level 5 and Level 7 diplomas in attachment-based psychotherapy, this podcast is your space to deepen your understanding, reflect on your practice, and stay connected to the heart of attachment-informed work. I'm Darren, a BACP-accredited person-centred counsellor and an attachment-based psychotherapist in private practice. As well as hosting this podcast, I teach Level 5 courses at Optima. I'm also a foster carer, so I see attachment from many angles. Joining me today, I have Uruj, who's a BACP-accredited psychotherapist, supervisor, and Level 5 and Level 7 lecturer in attachment psychotherapy at Optima. Before training as an attachment-based therapist, she spent nearly a decade working as a genetic counsellor in the NHS, supporting families navigating inherited and life-limiting conditions. Her work now sits at the intersection of attachment, identity, intergenerational trauma, genetics, and perinatal mental health. She works with individuals, couples, and therapists, and brings a culturally attuned lens shaped by her experience as a Pakistani Canadian, now living in the UK. It's great to have you with me today, Uruj. Thanks for being here. Decided we're looking at anxious ambivalent attachment, which we also call preoccupied. What do we mean when we speak about someone as being preoccupied or having preoccupied traits?
Thank you, Darren. I'm so glad to be here today and to speak about preoccupied attachment. So when we say preoccupied attachment, the first thing that comes to my mind is that this is one of the insecure attachment styles, but I want for us to have a conversation about going beyond this label and to look underneath at what you call the traits and what I would say are the defenses of preoccupied attachment. I wonder, Darren, when you hear preoccupied attachment, what sort of stereotypes come to your mind?
Someone who seeks reassurance, who seeks closeness, and who actually maybe can feel like quite hard work to the people that they're around. I mean, that sounds very harsh, but that was definitely my understanding of an anxious ambivalent style before training.
Absolutely. And I think that's really great for us to speak about that here, because these stereotypes can then become a block in that therapeutic work in order to understand our clients at a deeper level. So what you're describing there is really what we need to look underneath, actually, is the nervous system. And early on, for someone that has a preoccupied attachment, that connection wasn't always guaranteed. So Darren, when we can hear these stereotypes today, what that means is if we don't have that deeper understanding or training, is it can potentially become a block to understanding our clients at a deeper level. And so when we're talking about preoccupied traits in adulthood or in our clients, this might look like things like overthinking, but overthinking their relational exchanges. So this could be texting, this could be phone calls, work emails. So really playing over and over in their mind, have they said the right thing, or interpreting the responses that they're getting. They might become quite sensitive to shifts in tone. They'll be looking out for everybody around and seeing how people are responding to them. They may experience their emotions quite intensely. They might find it quite difficult to soothe, and especially if there's a distance or a perceived distance within the relationship. And so what this does is this can create difficulties for individuals to be on their own, to tolerate certain boundaries. And so when we look at this whole picture, underneath all of this is a fear of abandonment. It's a real deep longing for secure connection, which is what Bowlby tells us. And so this is what's going on beneath all of these stereotypes that you've brought here.
And it's interesting, isn't it? So the previous episode, we were looking at avoidant attachment. And actually, that underlying fear, it sits with both. What sits underneath them is not so different. The way that it enacts is where the difference lies. That that fear of being rejected, of being forgotten, of being on their own. So the need to seek the reassurance that they're okay and that they're not going to be abandoned. And I definitely can relate to that. I can have my moments where I worry about what other people think of me, where I can overthink things and I'm seeking reassurance. And I think that's important to acknowledge that many people will have similar defences against that fear of being alone, of being too much or not enough.
And actually, Darren, what you're sharing here is what we know, that individuals with a preoccupied attachment, we will see them sort of overrepresented in sort of the mental health areas, but also as clients and as practitioners. So that's very fascinating from both sides.
That is fascinating, and it makes complete sense to me why they're overrepresented within the therapy room, because these are exactly the kind of person that's going to move towards the work. They're going to be looking to find answers, to seek reassurance, to make changes, because they have a need for human interaction, closeness, understanding, and still feel that with a lot of these defences that we speak about, they bring an awful lot to the world. Actually, it can be really helpful to have a friend that overthinks and is present for us and meets our needs and is one step ahead of our own feelings and emotions. That really does take a toll on the individual, doesn't it? I mean, that's quite a heavy burden to place on yourself, to be that person. And I notice a lot of burnout with these clients.
Absolutely. Because what you're describing there is these traits or these defenses are part of a protective mechanism. It's protected them in childhood or in the way that they were raised to feel safe.
Why don't we look at that a bit more? What is it about a childhood that could lead to someone developing anxious, ambivalent traits in childhood, which we would then refer to really as preoccupied in adulthood? How does someone develop being preoccupied?
So this develops in environments, Darren, where caregiving was inconsistent. And what that means is it wasn't necessarily abusive or neglectful, but it was unpredictable. So sometimes the child will have had really attuned and compassionate caregiving and to be delighted in. On other times, there would be emotional unavailability from the caregivers, or that they would be overwhelmed with their own preoccupations. And so through that process, a child might learn that they need to stay alert, that they need to check, but which parent am I getting today? This idea that I need to work really hard to be seen or to be heard. And also this is where sometimes other defenses may come into the room, like illness or caregiving, or ways that the child can seek that proximity from their caregivers.
An example was shared that has stayed with me forever. Imagine being a child and having a fridge full of food, all your favourite foods, it's all there, all makes you feel great, it's amazing. The next time you go to that fridge, it's empty and there's no food there. The next time you go, the food's all back there again and it's amazing, it's good. What you're then likely to do is hang around that fridge and try and make sure that you maybe keep checking it often. Is the food still in there? Has anyone taken it? Because it feels great to have all the food in the fridge, and it feels really horrid when there is no food in the fridge. So you're going to keep checking, you're going to seek reassurance that the food is still there and that you can be nourished. Actually, that's been a metaphor that has stayed with me for until this day when we're speaking about preoccupied clients. It's checking the fridge. Is the food still going to be there? Because I love having the food and I love having it when I need it, but I can't rely on it being there. So I need to seek the reassurance. I need to keep checking it. And if that sounds like a silly example to you, hey, how about this one? How many times do you check for your passport before you go on holiday? You know you need your passport. Someone only has to say to me in the car, my husband will say on the way, you did pack the passports, didn't you? And I will literally have to stop the car at the side of the road, get out and check my bag, despite the fact I know I put the passports in there. I just need to reassure myself that they are still there, and that when I get to the airport and I need them, they're going to be there for me. And all of these metaphors really bring to life for me what we're speaking about and how this attachment style develops in childhood.
Absolutely. I really love that fridge example. I might borrow that from you when I'm teaching next, because you're essentially right on the spot there. Because what's happening there, as Bowlby has told us, is that attachment alarm system is being activated. It's because you know when you get that love and attunement, how important that is and how lovely it feels. And so when you don't get it, there's this anxiety around, when am I going to get it next? When am I going to get that full fridge again? And it's that uncertainty and that waiting that can be really difficult to know when that is. And so that gives rise to all of these different, very clever and intelligent defenses to make sure that you can access it.
And so when we're in the room, what's our aim here, Uruj? When we've identified that we have a fairly preoccupied client in the room. You know, they're seeking reassurance. They feel like they're a lot for others to deal with. What's our aim? What's the work that we need to do?
So the work here, Darren, is to slow things down, to slow the emotion down, actually. Because if a client is dysregulated, they can't use that thinking part of their brain, and we can't mentalize together or to think about, why did somebody not respond to your text until maybe 2 days later? Or what was going on for them, for example. So when we can slow down our clients, especially our preoccupied clients, and we can appreciate that we need to bring them more from their right brain, which is their emotion center, to their left brain, which is their thinking center. And so we want to help and support our preoccupied clients to develop more thinking around what they're experiencing, because the emotion's already being flooded. And so we want to contain and regulate the emotional side, and to help our clients think about the other people in their lives, or to see a different perspective, and to be able to hold and contain things even in between sessions, because it can be very hard or challenging for someone that's preoccupied to hold uncertainty.
When we say about slowing down the work, that sometimes that can mean doing what feels like is the opposite to our training as therapists, which is to sit and listen and hold and contain our clients. Because sometimes it means interjecting. We're not just simply listening and reflecting. Actually, we are interjecting and saying, well, okay, this is a lot of information coming my way. I wonder if we can just slow this down a bit. And that feels almost at odds sometimes, doesn't it, to interrupt our clients and to ask them to slow down, because often we say about moving towards the work, and this isn't a case of moving away from it. Actually, it's a case of digging deeper each time, because so much information can come our way. I don't know if this has been your experience, but mine is I can just feel like almost like a complete tsunami coming at me of information and emotions and opinions, and seeking that reassurance that I'm in agreement. And sometimes I say, well, I'm not sure what it is I'm even agreeing to here. Let's just slow this down, as you say. And I think slowing down can take more than one form, can't it, Uruj?
Absolutely. There's so many layers to this. And, in our work, it is about, as a tutor, to support students to deepen that level of clinical practice, to go to places where they can do that deeper work to safely slow our clients down. Another aspect of preoccupied clients that I've noticed over the years is they may bring everyone else into the session but themselves, and that might be a great defense. And so there's something about, in that slowing down, of refocusing actually onto our clients, and to say, what's the work we're doing here together? Because I'm hearing about all the work you're doing with all of these different relationships around you. That might look like compulsive caregiving. That might look like, all these worries and concerns for other family members, for friends. And so that's an important part to consider as well, is to always coming back to our client and to think about what they need from this space.
And I guess when we consider ourselves as the secure base for this client, it's offering them more than we would offer to maybe someone who has a secure attachment, because actually it's about containing the full amount of emotions and sensations that they're holding. And although we speak about being preoccupied, I find actually sometimes these clients aren't really engaging their brain. Being preoccupied almost sounds like, oh, okay, I'm thinking about this and I've got something else on my mind. Actually, I'm not sure often there's much thinking going on at all. I think it's an overwhelm of sensation and reaction rather than a genuine thought process as to what's happening in their lives.
Absolutely. I'd like to add here, you might find that in this type of work, there's often, as a supervisor, I'll get supervisees saying, I feel like we've circled around and we've come back to the same thing, or we're back to where we started, or I feel stuck. And there's something about in that preoccupation is rehashing, going over historic things over and over in hopes to make sense of them, and actually for us to be aware of why that's happening. If we can understand about why that's going on for our clients, we can then, as therapists and as supervisors, support the change or the shift that they're wanting to achieve.
It's really powerful stuff, isn't it? And the good thing is about a preoccupied client is that they will turn up and they will seek counselling. However, sometimes they almost want more from us than we're able to offer. Communication between sessions is more likely, and we've really got to hold our boundaries with this client group, haven't we?
Absolutely. That's one of the main focuses of supervision is boundary containment. To do meaningful work, we've got to keep our clients and ourselves safe. And it is hard, and we have to find ways to navigate, our preoccupied clients asking, what would you do? What are you doing on the weekend? Oh, where are you going on holiday? Do you have children? Do you have a family? All these questions, they'll just very naturally ask you. They want to know more about you. They want to know what you would do, what you would say. It's part of that reassurance seeking. It's part of that process of them trying to make sense of what they would do.
I'll tell you where my mind's just gone to is the preoccupied therapist, the therapist who has those traits. I guess I've had that thought a bit late in the conversation. If you're happy to come back for another episode, but it'd be amazing to dig deeper into that one.
I'd love to, because as we said before, we see this overrepresented in our area of work. So of course there's going to be preoccupied therapists as well, who may have earned their security through their work, through their personal professional development, but they can still, the transference and counter transference and triggers, we're all human. And so things can come up for us as well. And it's a really fascinating lens in supervision to consider the attachment of your supervisee, my own attachment, how all of these layers sort of work together. So I'd love to come back and explore that a bit more.
Excellent. Thank you, Uruj. So if what we've said today has felt personal to you, maybe keep a lookout for that episode that will come out later this series. Thank you so much for that bit of conversation. We've got a quick break now. When we come back, we'll have a look at our dilemma. If you've been carrying the emotional weight of your work lately, feeling stretched, tired, or a little disconnected, you're not alone. That's exactly why we created Restoring Your Secure Base, an attachment-informed therapist retreat designed to give you the space to pause, breathe, and reconnect with yourself, your work, and a community of therapists who truly understand. Across 2 days, you'll step away from the everyday into a calm, restorative environment at the Odney Club near Maidenhead in Berkshire. A beautiful setting that even inspired the world of The Wind in the Willows. We're also honoured that Linda Cundy will be joining us for a special talk and Q&A. The retreat includes workshops, shared reflection, experiential learning, 8 hours of CPD, and restorative experiences in a gong bath. Most importantly, it's a chance to reconnect with yourself and with a community that understands the work you do. To learn more and reserve your place, visit optimahealthservices.co.uk/therapist-retreat. Uruj is still with me now, and I'd like us to take a look at this week's dilemma. This is a bit of a classic one, and I'm sure we all know know what I mean when I say the phrase doorknob confession. That client who will leave a really big, important subject, piece of information, insight until the very end of their session. What's your thoughts on doorknob confessions, Uruj? What do we do
Oh,
as therapists with that?
I've got so many thoughts, Darren. But before I share mine, I wonder, what do you think that the client is sort of fearing to not bring it up sooner? What do you think is behind it?
Okay, so I do think sometimes it takes a while to build up the courage to do something. And I think that we need to acknowledge the fact that we're relationship building and it takes time to build trust and the rapport. However, when I think about a doorknob confession, I'm assuming that a lot of that is already there. And there's something extra at play. And I guess the fear that I would notice would be the fear of the session ending.
Absolutely. So when I hear, doorknob confessions for a preoccupied client, I'm thinking immediately around, is this a test of the relationship? Do you care about me enough to extend the session because I've brought something really important, something really difficult for me to have brought sooner? It's, as you said, is it a difficulty in regulating their system, their response that, okay, the session is coming towards an end? Or is it a bit of protest around, you're leaving me here and I have so much more to say. There's this like insatiable need with some of our preoccupied clients of them needing more from us, which is what we've discussed. And so it's really important here from an attachment lens, to appreciate those layers when we respond or when we then work with our client who's done that, and you've got like 2 minutes to go and you've got your next client booked in and you do have to end the session.
What do we actually do at the point of a doorknob confession?
What we do is we maintain that boundary for our clients. It's really important, if we are acting and serving as that secure base, having those clear, contained boundaries are really important for creating that safety. Because if we blur those lines, if we make exceptions, then it can be confusing for our clients as well. So provide that consistency. I think that boundary setting is really key. But how do we do that? And so it will be different depending on if you've got literally a few minutes, then I would sort of wrap up a session to acknowledge that they've shared this. And I tell them that, this sounds really important. And why don't we start with this next time? I'll hold it for you. As opposed to if they've done that, maybe say there's 5 or 10 more minutes still towards the end of session. If there's a bit more time, I might ask them, wonder what's made this feel so urgent towards the end of session? Or I wonder how we can address this with the time that we have, or to pause that here and bring it next time. But I would always acknowledge what they've shared and keep that boundary really firm. I know there might be an internal pull or tug to give an extra 5 minutes or an extra 10 minutes because it feels really big. But actually, if we put that clinical hat on, we've got to maintain those boundaries and consistency, especially for our clients.
And I have to say, having been on the receiving end of sessions that went on longer than they were planned to, and sometimes they'd go on for 20 minutes longer. And I had no concept. When you're the client, you're sitting in the room, you're so in your own world that you're just working with the stuff. You really are relying on the therapist to manage that space. And it made going to therapy really much harder for me because I almost felt like I had to keep an eye on things myself. And I also just simply didn't know how long I was going to be there for. So the practicalities of, well, what time do I pick? And what can I plan for afterwards and for the rest of the day? So, yeah, having been on the other side of that lack of boundaries, it really means so much to me to maintain those now for both sides. And as a therapist, we know sometimes we have another client coming in just 10 minutes time. We don't have long between those sessions. So it's essential for more than one reason to hold those boundaries.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for taking a deep dive into our preoccupied styles. and for looking at that dilemma at the end today. It's been fantastic to have you. Don't forget, you've promised now you'll come back. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me. It's been really great to have this conversation and this discussion, and I can't wait to come back and look at it from a supervisor's point of view.
Excellent. Thanks for joining us today on Attached Together. We'll see you next time. And now you can claim your free CPD certificate. You can either go to our website or look at the show notes and you'll find the link.